I'm here today with Annie from ThinqShift. So I want to say thank Annie for coming.
Thank you.
And one thing that's interesting to me about Annie is that we are actually both from the Atlanta area, which is something that we don't find very often. At least I don't.
Not at all.
Not at all. And we both have very similar educational backgrounds. I mean, with Clemson and Georgetown. You know,
Go Hoyas.
top maybe 150 universities if we include Clemson in that. I don't know, like maybe
Okay.
top 25, top 150,
Yeah, top 150
but very similar,
collectively.
collectively. And then
Exactly.
we come back to Atlanta after that, which doesn't happen very often. But one thing that really struck me about Annie and ThinqShift is, one, we have a mutual client, and that client is all about culture and trying to evoke that into their workspace. And Annie focuses on that, as do we. And one of the things that Annie and I were joking around about is that people really don't know how to define culture.
Yep.
They just don't. I mean, and we talk about, you know, like drinks, beer, you know, coffee, all that other stuff. Those are perks. They're not culture. So, you know, one of the questions I want to ask Annie is that, you know, how do you define culture?
Yeah, exactly. There are probably as many definitions of culture as there are people who are trying to define culture on a day-to-day basis. So how I personally define culture is how we do things around here.
Okay.
So it's not necessarily just the values of an organization or any given leader.
Right.
It's not just the perks or even the workspace, although that's a piece of it for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But really all of that manifests in behaviors. So how do we get things done around here?
Good. Okay, that makes sense. And then, you know, one thing that you guys talk about at ThinqShift a lot is being an adaptable leader.
Yes.
What does that mean?
Yeah, so what does it mean to be an adaptable leader? Well, if you think about the pace of change these days, whether you're talking about the business world, technology, our natural world around us, and where all those things converge, it's faster than ever before. So change is accelerating, right?
Yeah.
All of the things that we learned at Clemson and Georgetown X number of years ago
Right.
are ultimately become obsolete, right? So the real skill set that leaders need to develop and cultivate is adaptability.
Yes.
And that's the most critical skill set, and that's why we really teach that and coach around that. We talk about actually 4 Ds of adaptable leaders.
Okay.
So those are daring. So an adaptable
Nice.
leader needs to be daring, take risks,
Mm-hmm.
empower their team members
Okay.
to also take risks. The second one is being deliberate. So
Interesting. Okay.
putting a stake in the ground, being intentional about business choices, about how they invest their time, whether it be their own personal or professional development.
Okay.
The third one is dynamic, so that's kind of an obvious one.
Gotta be a dynamic leader,
But
yeah.
that's really the heart of adaptability,
Yeah.
right? So, and dynamic more in the sense of willingness to change and readiness and
Gotcha.
excitement for change,
Yeah.
actually, versus just being like jazzy and fun on stage. That's important too.
Jazz hands?
Jazz hands on stage is helpful, but actually not the heart of being a dynamic leader. It's really about embracing the fact that the world is changing quickly.
Yeah.
And the 4th D is discovery. So seeking discovery and being curious and wanting to learn new things at all times.
Yeah. And I mean, that's hard for what we see when it comes to space as well, is that there is so much changing and happens so fast that a lot of the spaces that people have been in for 5 or 7 years, it just has to change. Job functions, like the whole 9 yards, culture, everything else. So the 4 Ds is truly a thing that people need to focus on, and I can see that.
Absolutely.
You know, one thing you do is you help organizations and leaders with the 4 Ds. How do you help the leaders connect with their employees to instill that culture that the leadership wants?
Yeah, so first and foremost, helping them define their culture as it exists today.
Yeah.
Because we talked about there are a lot of different definitions of culture. It can feel nebulous and challenging to really even identify what is our culture today.
Yeah.
So diagnosing what our culture is today, looking at mindsets, looking at values, looking at behaviors. And a helpful framework that we like to teach is, who do you hire, fire, and promote, and why? Because if you really understand why you make those decisions, you can diagnose your culture pretty quickly. So first and foremost, we help them diagnose their culture as it exists today. Secondly, then envisioning what that future culture does look like with that same framework. Helping them pinpoint, these are the shifts that we need to make from today's culture to tomorrow's culture. And then, part of the solution then is your classic change management approach. There's new processes, there's new ways of communicating. Likely, we might need a new workspace, right? We might need some new perks and things like that all contribute to a change in evolution and culture.
Got it.
But what we've seen is probably 75% of your likelihood to be successful or to fail at a culture transformation is based on the leaders, and I mean that broadly.
Yeah,
all of the
okay.
leadership own values, mindsets, and behaviors, and the example that they're setting for their broader organization. So if I say that healthy conflict is important, and I'm a leader, and I can say that 150 times, which is important, by the way, but if I don't live that, I've completely undermined that cultural norm. So I'm surrounding myself with yes men and yes women. I fail to have difficult conversations on a day-to-day basis. I've completely undermined that cultural change. So what we do is we help to coach leaders in, first and foremost, are you ready to make a personal commitment to change? Do you see the need to change?
Yep.
And then what are some ways to change your habits, which we call brain training practices, so things you can do on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, to change your own habits and behaviors, and ultimately influence through example your organization.
That's awesome. Well,
Thank
good.
you.
Well, thank you. Now, how do they get in touch with you?
Well, they can get in touch with me at Annie.Duguid at ThinqShift.com. Patrick didn't know how to say my last name. Now he does. That's ANNIE.DUGUID at ThinqShift, which is THINQ Shift, SHIFT.com.
Perfect. Annie, thank you.
Thank you so much, Patrick. Appreciate it.
Yep.